We're opening up at Scuderia Silva over here in Portland, Oregon. What we're going to do tonight is start blueprinting an MGB engine. We're actually going to build the whole thing tonight. I think we can have it done about midnight or so if we're careful. And so the first thing I'm going to do is blueprinting just means we measure everything. So I'm not sure if the camera can tell, but this piston ring says top right there. And then I'm going to measure it. The end gap is specified in the book, which I'm sure you have. I came up with about 11 thousandths right there. It's just tight right there. That's 11. The top end's actually 12. Nothing wrong with that. That's a good spec. I think the variation is maybe 8 to 12 or something. I don't know. And but that's about what it is. And so that fits perfectly. Now what we're actually going to do is, as we start to set this up, there's a lot of measuring to be done. And we've made a plan. We've opened up a book. And we've been able to accumulate a lot of information. It took about 4 or 5 hours of in-depth research. And so for this particular engine, we made a digest. I could show it to you, but it's not out here right now. The digest contains all the information as to ring gap, piston, distance to the wall. So we're gonna. I've already done the piston clearance, but I'm gonna use the piston. This is number 1, and I've got the water pump right here. This is also number 1, and I'm gonna push that ring down the hole a little bit, right in front of your face. There you go, and kind of lock that up, get it nice and even. It's down there. I want it around 1 inch, and that's approximately what it is. And that would be a good spot to actually take a measurement and see if we're. That's exactly perfect right there. That's absolutely perfect. Now, I'm going to take this ring here. I'm going to shove it down another spot. The piston is only, you'd be surprised how much of the piston is actually making power. There's exhaust gases fleeing the top here because of the explosion, and so they're blasting past all this. And so I actually want to measure the ring down here to the third. We're actually past the third ring. I'm going to measure it a little bit farther down the bore. The ring's not going to run down that bore, but the piston's going to run down that bore. Once again, I already measured the piston to the cylinder wall. It was, I think, about 1/1000th and a half, or 15 10,000ths. And so we're looking pretty sweet. And so I just want to measure it in the bottom of the bore too. Some people consider the bottom of the bore the bottom of the actual piston, so you might want to shove it in actually a little bit farther. I get it just below the wrist pin. That's my sweet spot, and I'm going to measure it one more time. It's going to be the same because the bore's straight. If I had exactly. So that's phase 1. I've measured the ring gap and I've measured the piston clearance to the engine. We could go over it again later a little bit and lay out the specs, but you can read it in your book. In any case, I'm going to do that with all the rings to all the cylinders, and I'm going to write that down in my log. And then I'm also going to start putting together the connecting rod bearings into the connecting rods on the bottom of the piston, like this. I'm going to start putting the rod bearings in and start putting, I don't have the lock tabs on here yet, but we're going to set that up. And we'll start measuring some other distances in the bottom end. I'm also going to CC this engine and verify the combustion chamber areas, head gasket area, piston top area, and then I'll show you the formula that I use to calculate the actual physical compression ratio. They'll be a little bit different from cylinder to cylinder, but we'll get a good variation on what's going on. And we're also going to do the inflow. After we get the pistons kind of measured out, I'm doing this a little bit backwards. When we get the pistons measured out, we'll flip it back over, and then we'll use plastic gauge, and which is the house brand, and it might be called something else, but we're going to use some plastic gauge to measure the amount of efficient oil area there is between the crank and the block bearings, and also between the crank pins and the inside of the connecting rod here. And so we'll measure that, crush them down, take them apart. We're not going to put any lubricant in anything. We're going to basically dry fit it. And so then we'll get those crush measurements. I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. For now, I'm going to do these piston ring measurements across the top here. And then I'll go over those with you after I get them all measured. They're going to be perfect. I've got a fantastic machinist, and so. But I want to verify all that, and we'll come back to Scuderia Silva in just a minute. Hey ho ho! We're back at Scuderia Silva, freezing our little cheeks off in beautiful downtown Portland, Oregon. One thing that happens on these blocks all the time, and it actually happens to a lot of different engines, is over time people don't take all the O-rings out of the oil system, and when they don't take all the oil rings out that accumulate in there, what you get is something like this. Now, I took this old school to Calumet big canister oil filter off here, and I made sure every time I take it off, even with a regular oil filter, you want to make sure you've got one seal in your hand. And maybe they did make sure they had one seal in their hand at some point, but what happens is over time somebody doesn't check it, and so we've got another oil seal that's stuck in here, and I'm not really sure what year it got in here, but I'll guarantee you somebody put it in here, left it in here. I can't even get it out, and they just put a new seal on top, and that's why, you know, you're bitching about your MGB leaking oil. Well, hello, right there. So I'm going to shut the camera off for a minute and get that thing loosened up so you can see what I'm talking about. We'll be right back. Okay, now this has been in here a long time. This is not a regular situation here. We're going to work this around. We can see it falling apart. It is hard as hell. And if I'm really lucky, it's all going to come out in one piece. It could just snap into little bits. And hopefully, oh man. Okay, we're right at the point where somebody's going to either start bleeding or that thing's going to break. This has been in here for years and years. We see it all the time, and it's just part of the prep that you go through every time you do an engine. You look at every detail and make sure you're right on track. Right back. Hey, so I picked around the whole thing, got her out real nice, pulled it out, and I think when we got to about here I thought I was going to start getting stuck. But it was good quality, probably maybe even from the factory, and that piece came out. It is very crunchy and hasn't sealed any oil in a long time. You can see all the cracks in it and stuff, but in any case, you want that out of the when you rebuild your engine, you want all that stuff gone. We're going to start coming up here to the top and change, well, you can't see anything. We're going to change up and put the block on the bench over here. I don't prefer to build these on an engine stand at this point. I just like them on the bench. And so we're going to put the crankshaft in and do some plastic gauge measurements, and we'll come right back. Hey, whoa, ho, hey, ho, we're back in action over here at Scuderia Silva. Another nice evening, about 25 degrees or so. It's warming right up, and what we're going to go through right now is part of the blueprinting process for any engine that you might want rebuild yourself. We're going to CC the cylinder head, and then we're going to CC the head gasket as part of that operation because it's got a certain volume. And we're going to CC the pistons, and when I say CC, I'm going to use I'm going to use this little guy, and we're going to load it with 60 cc's of fluid. I like to use automatic tranny fluid because you can see it better. It's pink. Now you can see I've taken one of my little lids that I made for the combustion chamber there on number 1, and so I'm going to zoom in on that. What we're going to do is just decide how much volume that cylinder has in it. And so I've got some non-stock spark plugs that I like to use. We're not doing this down to the scientific nth degree. This is a regular racy street engine, I like to call it. And so we're not building a drag race engine. We're not gonna get down to the itty bitty infinitesimal measurements. But what we want to do is have some idea. They made a low compression engine at 8:1, and they made a higher compression engine at 8.7:1. So by calculating all the volumes of all this stuff, I'll show you a formula later, and you can calculate how many what your compression ratio is going to be. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to fill up my little tube here with 60 cc's. If we're doing an Alfa Romeo head, Ferrari head, Maserati head where they're largely recessed, then you would obviously need a lot more volume in the combustion chamber, in the tube, because the piston actually projects into the combustion chamber. So you've got to have a special fixture for those other engines. But let's do this MGB engine right now. This is going in our hot rod client's car. It's an MGA coupe, 1955, but it's got a 63 MGB 1800 8G engine. That's the very earliest of the 1800s, and it's a good block. It's got a very good crankshaft in that you don't have a lot of, we'll get into that a little bit later, but you don't have a lot of rotating friction loss because you only have half of the main cap. So that engine has the ability to spin. We're only going to go, the camshaft I think runs out of gas at around 5800, and so we wanted to keep the stock red line, the yellow's at 5500 on a B, and the I think on most of the BMC stuff, and four-cylinder MGs I mean, and probably four-cylinder other stuff too. But in any case, the valves will start to float at 6200. We're never going to get to 6200 unless you miss a shift. But by the time you're running out of camshaft, if your peak horsepower is between 2500 and 5800, say, which is about where we're at with this one, there's no reason to rev it past 5800 because you've already maxed the power band out, and if you want to go faster, you got to get back into the power band. So this is going to be a nice street engine. We're going to take care of it, and let's get this CCing done. I'll fill this thing up, and we'll calculate how many cc's that first cylinder has. Hey, we're back. Got a little dirt on that cylinder head. It's okay. So what we're going to do, I've got exactly 60 cc's of fluid in here. Probably look. It's hard to read it, but it's exactly 60 cc's. The marks on there are black, so it's, well, you can kind of see it. It's upside down. And yeah, I'm dead nuts on that. So that's where you want to be. The camera angle's a little weird. It looks a little higher. It's not. So we have 60 cc's in the tube. Let's fill up the combustion chamber. You want to be careful. I don't want to be moving this thing around a whole bunch, and I don't want to be sloppy with it. It's not a very good machine that I have here. I'm going to go to Nuremberg Scientific tomorrow, and I'm going to buy a new, whatever the hell this thing's called, syringe, because this doesn't work with the dam, and it doesn't change anything, but I'm going to sit here and fight this for a few minutes, but you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to fill it up till it hits the top of that area and seals against my white lithium grease, and I put a white lithium grease Permatex seal around the top of that plastic cap, and that is so the plastic is actually sealed to the cylinder head. So let me fight this for a second. Okay, I had a little anomaly with the camera. So you can see that I filled the chamber up completely, and I rotated it around a little bit. It has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. It should be mostly flat. I've got it right up to the hole, but I don't have any up above the combustion chamber line. There's none in the center part of the hole, as I think you can see. And so I've got it topped off perfectly. Now we can look at my little juice kettle over here. There we go. I got 15 cc's left. So in that cylinder there, we got 45 cc's. So there's our first measurement, and we're going to do all of them. There's nothing we can really do that much about any of it anyway. We're not going to change the chamber, change any of the chamber shape or any of that kind of stuff. But it's going to give us a general overall idea of what we got cooking. Out. Here we are back on the set, and we've CC'd the heads. They're very close. They're so close that I can't tell any difference. And without being some sort of high-tech lab, it's exactly as we'd expect. So now the pain in the ass is that you got to clean all that stuff up and get this back to completely dead clean. We'll put our main bearings in. The mains on the rods have this little tang that you have to pay attention to. Normally, like almost always, the tangs match together. So you'll have a tang here and a tang over here. And so when you put it together in here, you want to do the same thing. There are cars, I think BMW does that differently. They do it backwards. Let me see which cap. Can you see? Yeah, you can see that one right there. That's fine. Okay, so here's my main bearing cap. Main bearing. And you want to get it dead even. You will feel a hair of a lift on both sides. It's just barely there at all, and that provides the crush when you tighten it down. So we'll go ahead. We want to put these in dry this time because we're going to measure the oil clearance, like I said, and so we'll use a thing called plastic gauge made by Seal Power. Get that at your local auto parts store normally. And then I'm going to put them in the cap the same way, into the caps. Just put the tang in place first, and then push them down nice and flat like that. That's the rear. Now we have to, this is the center one, and you can tell that because it's got a thrust washer area machined into it on both sides. That controls how much the crankshaft flows back and forth. That's got a specification around probably 4,000 or 5,000. We'll talk about that later. But I'm going to put the crankshaft in, and then I'm going to set these in place, and then I'm going to bolt it down with nuts, and then I'm going to measure the distance between the crankshaft and the bearings themselves. That's called the oil running clearance, and that's how much, as the crankshaft is whipping around in there, that's the area around the whole crank on every side. Obviously, as the crank's rotating, it's pushing against, it runs in an eccentric orbit, so you've got a little wave of oil ahead of it, but the main clearance I think is around 2,000. I'm going to check it. It'll be 1.5 or 2,000, something like that. So I'll put these main caps on here, get the crank in, and put in these last bearings, and we'll check back. shortly. What we're going to do now is put the crankshaft in. Having a major problem with the, I don't know, the engine was torn apart before I got it, and I don't know, we've got some cap nuts that are not aircraft nuts, they're not lockers, they don't have plastic in them. And I'm missing something, so I don't know what I'm missing, but it doesn't matter yet. Because what we're going to do is put the crankshaft in there. We'll talk about the crank later. There we go. There's a few things I'm going to have to do to it. It's got 3 spacers up here. I'm going to assume those are correct, but remember we're going to measure the end float right here in the main, in the center cap, the one that has these indents on it. So we'll do that in a minute. What we want to do now is put our plastic gauge on there. The plastic gauge is going to give us our measurement in thousandths of an inch for how much oil clearance there is, vertical oil clearance. It's basically just the running clearance of the engine. It's how much space you need. So we take a piece of plastic gauge that once again you buy at your local store. I don't want that crank quite there. I'm not going to turn the crankshaft. I'm not going to turn the crankshaft once we install that, and notice that once again I don't have any lubricant of any type in here. I'll put a little bit of assembly lube in here, but the main grease we're going to use is just a normal motor oil. So then I put a piece in here, back here on number 2. And then I don't even like that one either. I'm going to put this right there. And right here. And then we're going to put one on the front. And when we come back, I will have torqued these all down. Then we'll pop the caps back off, and I'm going to use the gauge which is on the product, and we compare the flatness of the product there, the plastic gauge itself, to the thickness here, and we'll get a reading of how many thousandths we have between the crank cap and the actually the whole main assembly here in the crankshaft. If the machinists did their job right, we should be within the specs and we can move forward. All right. We've put our plastic gauge in there. Now we've got to take the main caps back off. I already got this one loose, but I want to show you how I do this. I just use that's probably a 3.5 inch. I've just got a spare bolt. It's got fine threads, it's 1/2 inch. Don't use a coarse one here. But instead of, they have a tool, you could weld up a tool real quick. But instead of taking however long it's going to take me to make a tool, I'm going to make my own tool this way. I just keep this about 45 degrees and use this big thing here. Probably have to move it over here. And I just smack the crap out of it. And you want to use, these aren't going to chip off any metal into the block. Remember that we've cleaned the thing relentlessly. And so I'm not using any brass hammers or anything like that. You can beat on this thing here and get that moving. Okay, so there's our indication right here, and we'll grab the little gauge, and we just compare the packaging. Let's see here, clearance range. There we go. We want the thousandth side, not the metric side. So in any case, you just hold this up here, and then you line that up to however thick that thing is. And these repeat themselves down the line, and that's your measurement. I don't have my glasses, so I can't tell you what it is. But we will soon. Now, take your, see if I can keep that in the picture. Now, in this one in the middle here, I beat this one up the same way I lifted that one off. This one in the middle here, you can basically just open it up like that, wiggle it a little bit, and it'll come right off in your hand. Now you don't want to drop that bearing shell. And once again, that measurement's the same, and I'll take a look at it and let you know what's going on here in a second. We crushed the plastic gauge, and I had to take a closer little peek at it, but what it means is that we're right on schedule, we're right on specifications, and this thick top number, there's only really 4 that we have a choice of. So the thick top number is 1/1000th. If it's thinner, it's 1/1000th and a half, and then 2/1000ths is down here, and the last mark is the 3/1000ths. So we ended up with 2 at 150, and the number 2 was right between the two. That's, I'm going to call that 175, and which is getting a little specific, but whatever. So it's about in the middle. It's right within spec. So away we go. Now we're going to do the thrust washers, and to hold the thrust washers in, I use molybdenum grease, just like you use for the grease gun, the high-end grease, not the crappy stuff. And we're going to put that on here on the outside. Now this is the side that goes not against the crankshaft but against the cap. I've already put them in the block. The procedure is identical. This is the main bearing cap that we're going to use for the middle here because that has the thrust on it. So we just set that on there like that. Put that little tang in there. Now the 2 bottom ones do not have the locating tang, the ones on the block, so just only worry about the tangs being up on the top there. And I'm going to go ahead and load this other next one up. And then I like using my hands. You can use a brush, but this next part's going to be a little messy for you anyway, but it's all clean, brand new grease and stuff, so you don't want to get too excited with this. I really like Permatex assembly lube, and their assembly lube for engines is called Ultra Slick, and but in this instance here I want this to stay in place because we have to measure the thrust. So here I have the copper side out in the block. I'm going to lube this up here. I just want some juice on it while it's slamming around right at first. Get everybody excited to work with each other. And once again, we're going to put the assembly lube onto the bearings themselves. So the assembly lube, I want to show you a picture of it. Get the molly off my hand first. The stuff I like to use is my Permatex. There you go. Permatex Ultra Slick 81950. That's the right stuff. And it's red. And I'm just going to kind of let that flow out a little bit on those bearing shells. Huh. Isn't that weird? Just a little imperfection in that casting right there. Nothing to worry about. Anyway, put some of that down. And then we're going to run that around. Now I don't want to get it on the tank, on the ends up here. I only want to get it on the bearing face itself. You can get a little on there, but try not to be too sloppy about it. I try to be fairly thorough. Keep in mind that when we crank the engine up and actually start it, we're going to probably ground the coil wire so that it won't start until we see the oil light go out. Of course, we're going to pre-prime the oil pump as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit here after we blueprint the oil pump. And so that's what I'm going to do to the other side. I'm going to slam the crank in. I'm going to bolt all this down. And then once I have it bolted down, I'll come back as I'm torquing it. And then we'll measure the end thrust. And we should be able to get moving down the road if we get our end thrust right. When you measure the thrust, which is the amount the flywheel's the crankshaft's allowed to go forward and backward, you need 4 to 5 thousandths of an inch of thrust measured here in the center for the amount of movement that the crankshaft moves forward and backward. And so when you put on the clutch, it shoves the crankshaft forward. When you accelerate, it shoves it forward. Actually, when you accelerate, it shoves it backwards. When you decelerate, it shoves it forward. So there's a measurement right here from the side of the crank against the thrust washers that look thusly. And so you put these into the main caps here, which I haven't done yet, but they sit here. I've put this in the block part. It does not have the tang on it. And so now I'm going to measure the thrust, and what I found with this segment's going to be called Why Should We Blueprint? Well, we blueprint everything because here we are, we've got a lot of money in this engine, a lot of money in machining, and when I discovered the issue when I put the cap on, the crank turns fine by itself. It's very free, nice, and it's got good movement and everything. So we're not worried about that, but when we go to measure the thrust, the specification is 4 to 5 thousandths. Here's a thousandth and a half, and when we measure it, this is the thinnest feeler gauge I've got, and at a thousandth and a half I can just barely start to feel it. It's a hard shot. I can just barely start to feel it just start to go in there, but it doesn't have enough strength to go in there. So I'm going to say that that's around probably 1/1000th of an inch. So I'm going to have to send the crankshaft back. And the fault is not in the crankshaft. The fault is in the faulty engine parts that we're getting now, like these thrust bearings. The first ones I got actually measured 96 thousandths in thickness. And when I measured the factory ones, they were more like 91. I'm sorry, these measured 94 thousandths in thickness. We needed 91 or 92, and so it scrubbed off all of our thrust. So I'm going to take this back out, unassemble it, and get 4 to 5 thousandths of an inch right here. Now I used my rubber mallet right on the back of the crank, and I just kind of smacked it in there to make sure when we did our measurement here, and then I use a little screwdriver in here and make sure that the bearing's separated from this side of the crank. But once again, I cannot even get 1/1000th and a half out of it. And so we're going to ship that baby back to the machine shop. It's not their fault. It's the fault of the thrust washer manufacturer. And we're going to clean that up. So we'll be taking all this apart again and get those main caps back out. And that's why we put it together dry and measure everything first. The only thing I have in there is assembly lube. I don't have any Loctite on anything on the nuts. And so we'll measure it and put it back in. So that's why you blueprint. Okay, so where we're at is we've got the main caps in. Notice that I put my super juice on the main bearing there. Notice that I do not have any super juice on the caps. Those are totally dry. Notice that I've got the bearing lubed up, but there's also no juice. Gonna move the camera. This will be awkward a little bit. There's also no juice on the block either down there because we don't want anything between there. The center already has the thrust washers installed in there, and so I'm going to show you how I seat this. The front has the doggone it. Oh man, it's got the keyway or the keys installed in the keyways. I've got the front shims. There's 3 of them, and these were the ones that came factory with this, and I'm using the factory pulley. I don't really expect to have to change that, but that's the thrust shims here. And so that's the only adjustable part you've got. Now, people do it differently. The way I do it is I put my bolt in here, and I very carefully, anyway, I'm going to hit this right here in order to seat that main. But what I want to do is I also want to bring careful attention as you're beating on this. My point is that you can see there's a bearing in here, and it's still tucked into the main cap. As you're beating this into place, you want to make sure that you're lined up so that the front of the block and the front of the main cap are the same. I use a Stanley. This happens to be a Stanley tool, but it's my old friend. You want to make sure that that main bearing stays in there as you're tapping this down. So I like to hit it with nice firm hits. And now it's going to seat. And then you can use that bolt as a little leverage. Check it out. If it's seated down right, it feels real good like that, okay? So now, can you see the back one? Yeah, kind of. Okay, so anyway, here's the back of the cap there. And bring this back over here. I think you can see that. So I'm going to slide that on there. Once again, this is dry, that's dry. They're dry on both sides of the block down there. And now we're going to offer this up, as our British friends say, and get that going there. I'm going to take this one out of here. There we go. I'm going to move it down to here. Get that one seated. Probably maybe I'll do that real quick right now. And you just want to, I listen to it, and I can tell I'm down right there, so that's perfect. Now we're seated. We've got the thrust washers once again in the block here, and then in the main cap here. And so we'll measure our thrust. When we measure the thrust, we're going to put the feeler gauge right in there. We want, I think, about 4 to 5 thousandths thrust. Here's our rear main. There's no seal that goes on at this point. Actually, in this one, there's no seal at all. But you've got to do the same thing. You've got the bearing shell in there. And without pinching your finger, you got to kind of just get it going down there. And watch that cap. That bearing's not falling out. And I'm kind of using this to stop. It's perfect. Okay, now that's down. Now I once again check the back edge here. That looks real nice. And you'll notice in the front here, there's room for a felt seal right here. We're going to change that up a little bit. There's one for the back too. Those are notorious for leaking. We're going to do something about that. And so that's that. And there is no sealant between here. So now we're going to put the new hardened washers on. And the yeah, that's not a bad shot there. That's okay. I like to be a little bit more on top of it here. Yeah, there we go. Close. Like that. Okay. So we've got our hardened nuts. They are also aircraft style nuts. So I use two different sets that are 1/2 inch fine thread, and I use one set, the aircraft nuts, for the final. But I'm going to use, I've just been using to set this up and to torque it the first time and to check the plastic gauge. I just use this regular nut here. So it does not have any plastic insert, as you can see. And it's fine thread, but it's 1/2 inch. So you put that on here. Throw that on there with a washer. And then you can torque and untorque, and that doesn't ruin these, and then you can use them again. But now we've done all that. Pardon me, we've measured it all. So we're going to put these hardened washers on here that I picked up. You can tell they're hardened because they're that goldish color. And we're going to put those on each cap. And I kind of feel them if there's a soft shoulder, and in this case there is here with the in the case of this one, the numbers and the manufacturer on the face. It's got a harder edge on this backside. I put this harder edge toward the block, and this one's upside down. So that's that song and dance. And now we're going to torque those down, and there we go. We're going to torque that down. So we torqued the main caps to 25 pounds, and then I torqued them to 50 pounds. These two, then those two, then these two. And the last torque is 75 pounds. So I put the big one, actually it's 70 pounds. I'm fibbing to you. So you hold on to it and we'll pull on the torque wrench until we hear it click. Like that. And you might be able to tell I already did it. So you do those, these two, and then come back here and do those. So now that that's torqued, I'm going to check that it freely rotates, which it does. Yippee-ki-yay. And now we're going to address the front. Oh, man. There we go. Now, one thing I didn't mention that I wanted to mention to you is that my daughter goes to, I think it's Joann Fabrics or something, just buys pipe cleaners. And you can get a mess of them in a couple different sizes, of whatever hobby store is handy to you. And so they come in the small size, and then they come in the big size. And so you use whatever's appropriate. And so what I've done long before where we're at right now is you just go through these oil galleries. I'm sorry, these are not galleries, these are galleys on the crankshaft, and just run it all the way through there. We already cleaned it out with brake cleaner, and you just come out perfectly clean. That's what you want to see. I've already done it to all of them. It's just another tip that I use to really make sure that everything's cleaned up nicely. I do the same thing with the block. So that's that song and dance. Let's put the front crank sprocket on here. We still have our shims in here, and on the front we looked at earlier. And I'm going to assume they're correct. I'll check them, of course, but we assume they're correct. And then we have our sprocket. It's got a little dot on the front. Here's our keyway. Here's our keys. And so I've lube that up a little bit there. And I'm just going to lube it up a little bit more. Once again, we're using just the regular engine oil that I'll be running in this, which is Castrol 2050. It's the GTX, but it's also got the replacement it's got the replacement for the zinc in there. Sorry, I got sidetracked for a minute. So let me push this down. And sometimes you can do it all the way with your hands, sometimes you can't. A lot of times you can't, actually. So you just got to give it some love. And of course, by love, I mean beat on it. So we're all lined up with the keyway. I like using my rubber dead blow mallet until we get it on there. Then just lightly set that on there. And she's home. Okay, that's where it goes. Now, so we've installed, that's the lower sprocket for the timing chain. That's going to fit on there, but we also want to, let's see, we've got an oil splash ring on this, and I really did not like what they sent me to the point that I'm not using what they sent me. And what they sent me was this. And I don't know what kind of scraps we ran into at the end of the day on Friday or Monday morning or whatever, but this is what the other one looked like. And I have to say, I prefer this one. So, you know, when you look at it like that. So I'm going to clean this up. I wasn't going to use it, but this is not, we're not using that. There's no way. So I'll clean this one up. That one's going to go right here. And that's an oil. That is an oil slinger. And then the cover will go on over here. And that's got the seal on it. And then after we put the cover on, then we've got a lock washer that goes out here, and then we've got the actual crank nut itself, which will fit onto the end down here on the outside of the pulley. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. And I'm going to go ahead and check it out, and we'll be catching you soon. Next, we're going to probably put the connecting rods and the pistons in next. Okay, we've got the front assembled on the front of the crank here. That's what it looks like. I just want to burn the parts, and we'll start on the timing chain here in a little bit. We get the nuts torqued down. Crank looks good. Painted the widget for the distributor, and then a couple of points of order over here that need to be taken note of is we went ahead and measured the yeah, that's not a good way to do it. We went ahead and measured the ounces on the pistons to make sure that they, as part of our blueprinting, we just want to make sure that they're all They're all the same. They'll come out to 18.5. I did them all. So they're perfect. Let's go over the ins and outs of the connecting rods. These are with all the nuts, bolts. Oh, you little toad. I passed my time limit. Okay. Well, that thing's thinking about it. Okay, there we go. Now we got a clear scale. So I'm going to put these in the same exact spot, just off the corner of the deal here. And I'm going to put the lock washer on. Okay, that's 36. There, I'm going to get it right, almost on that, touching that corner. There we go. Okay. There's one. There's number 2. That's actually the 3 was the last one I did. Okay, there's 2. There's 1. Just a second. There we go. Let's try this. That should be the same. Okay, that is actually the same. That one we have a half a tenth of an ounce, and then let's get that. So we have about a tenth of an ounce between rods altogether, and so we can do a little machining on them now. Okay, here we go. This is the final pin, and we see that we're right there. That's us. So we're 1,000th and a half. That's perfect. This is 0.001 to 0.0027. So we're right in the middle of the thick of it. That matches all the rest of them. We're ready to go.